And round to the front door, Breck, and pay them coyotes the 10 spot, and let's go. The grub I been getting here would turn a Lobo's stomach." "Well," I says, "I ain't exactly got the $10 glaze. I had to have a shirt because mine got tore, so—" He gave a yelp like a stricken elk and grabbed the bars convulsively. "Air you crazy?" he hollered. "You squanders my money on linens and fine raiment, whilst I languishes in a prison dungeon?" "Be calm," I advised. "I still got $5 a yarn and one of mine. All I got to do is step down to a gambling hall and build it up." "Build it up!" says he fiercely. "Listen, blast your hide! Does you know what I've had for breakfast, dinner, and supper ever since I was throwed in here? Beans, beans, beans!" Here he was so overcome by emotion that he choked on the word. "And they ain't even first class beans neither," he said bitterly, when he could talk again. "They're full of grit and wormholes, and I think the Mex cook washes his feet in the pot he cooks 'em in." "Well," I says, "such cleanliness is to be encouraged, because I never heard of one before which washed his feet in anything. Don't worry, I'll get in a poker game and win enough to pay your fine and plenty over." "Well, get at it," he begged. "Get me out before supper time. I wants a steak with onions so bad I can smell it." So I headed for the Golden Steer saloon. There weren't many men in there just then, but there was a poker game going on, and when I told them I craved to set in, they looked me over and made room for me. There was a black whiskered cuss which said he was from Cordova, which was dealing, and the first thing I noticed was he was dealing his own hand off the bottom of the deck. The others didn't seem to see it, but us Bear Creek folks has got eyes like hawks. Otherwise we'd never live to get grown. So I says, "I dunno what the rules is in these parts, but where I come from we almost always deals off the top of the deck." "Air you accusing me of cheating?" he demands passionately, fumbling for his weapons, and in his agitation dropping 3 or 4 extra aces out of his sleeves. "I wouldn't think of such a thing," I says. "Probably them marked cards I see sticking out of your boot tops is merely souvenirs." For some reason this seemed to infuriate him to the point of drawing a bowie knife, so I hit him over the head with a brass cuspidor, and he fell under the table with a holler groan. Some of the fellers run in and looked at his boots sticking out from under the table, and one of 'em said, "Hey, I'm the justice of the peace. You can't do that. This is an orderly town." And another one said, "I'm the sheriff. If you can't keep the peace, I'll have to arrest you." This was too much, even for a mild-mannered man like me. "Shut your fool heads!" I roared, brandishing my fists. "I come here to pay Glaze Bannock's fine and get him out of jail, peaceable and orderly, and I'm trying to raise the dough like a deleted gentleman. But by golly, if you hyenas pushes me beyond endurance, I'll tear down the cussed jail and snake him out without paying no blasted fine." The justice of the peace turned white. He says to the sheriff, "Let him alone. I've already bought these here new boots on credit on the strength of them $10 we gets from Bannock." "But," says the sheriff dubiously, and the J.P. hissed fiercely, "Shut up, you blame fool! I just now recognized him. That's Breckenridge Elkins." The sheriff turned pale and swallowed his Adam's apple and says feebly, "Excuse me, I uh I ain't feeling so good. I guess it's something I et. I think I'd better ride over to the next county and get me some pills." But I don't think he was very sick from the way he run after he got outside the saloon. If they'd been a jackrabbit ahead of him, he would have trampled the gizzard out of it. Well, they'd taken the black whiskered gent out from under the table and started pouring water on him, and I seen it was now about supper time, so I went over to the cabin where Judith lived. I was met at the door by a iron-jawed female about the size of a ordinary barn, which give me a suspicious look and says, "Well, what you want?" "I'm looking for your sister, Miss Judith," I says, taking off my Stetson politely. "What you mean, my sister?" says she with a scowl, but a much milder tone. "I'm her aunt." "You don't mean to tell me," I said, looking plumb astonished. "Why, when I first seen you I thought you was her herself, and couldn't figure out how nobody but a twin sister could have such a resemblance. Well, I can see right off that youth and beauty is a family characteristic." "Go 'long with you, you young scoundrel," says she, smirking and giving me a nudge with her elbow which would have busted anybody's ribs but mine. "You can't soft soap me. Come in. I'll call Judith. What's your name?" "Breckenridge Elkins, ma'am," I says. "So," says she, looking at me with new interest. "I've heard tell of you, but you got a lot more sense than they give you credit for." "Oh, Judith!" she called, and the winders rattled when she let her voice go. "You got company?" Judith come in looking purtier than ever, and when she seen me she batted her eyes and recoiled violently. "Who's that?" she demanded wildly. "Mr. Breckenridge Elkins of Bear Creek, Nevada," says her aunt. "The only young man I've met in this whole dern town which has got any sense. Well, come on in and set. Supper's on the table. We was just waiting for Curly Jacobs," she says to me, "but if the varmint can't get here on time he can go hungry." "He can't come," I says. "He sent word by me he's sorry." "Well, I ain't," snorted Judith's aunt. "I give him permission to just because I figured even a bodacious flirt like Judith wouldn't cotton to such a sapsucker, but—" "Aunt Henrietta!" protested Judith, blushing. "I can't abide the sight of sech weaklings," says Aunt Henrietta, settling herself carefully into a rawhide bottomed chair which groaned under her weight. "Drag up that bench, Breckenridge. It's the only thing in the house which has a chance of holding your weight outside the sofy in the front room. Don't argy with me, Judith. I says Curly Jacobs ain't no fit man for a gal like you. Didn't I see him strain his fool back trying to lift that there barrel of salt I wanted fotched to the smoke house? I finally had to tote it myself. What makes young men so blame spindlin' these days?" "Pap blames the Republican Party," I says. "Haw, haw, haw!" says she in a guffaw which shook the doors on their hinges and scared the cat into convulsions. "Young man, you got a great sense of humor, ain't he, Judith?" says she, cracking a beef bone betwixt her teeth like it was a pecan. Judith says yes, kind of pallid, and all during the meal she eyed me kind of nervous like she was expecting me to go into a war dance or something. Well, when we was through and Aunt Henrietta had ate enough to keep a tribe of Sioux through a hard winter, she riz up and says, "Now clear out of here whilst I washes the dishes." "But I must help with 'em," says Judith. Aunt Henrietta snorted. "What makes you so eager to work all of a sudden? You want your guest to think you ain't eager for his company? Get out of here." So she went, but I paused to say kind of doubtful to Aunt Henrietta, "I ain't sure Judith likes me much." "Don't pay no attention to her whims," says Aunt Henrietta, picking up the water barrel to fill her dishpan. "She's a flirtatious minx. I've took a liking to you, and if I decide you're the right man for her, you're as good as hitched. Nobody couldn't never do nothing with her but me, but she's learnt who her boss is, after having to eat her meals off the mantel board a few times. G'wan in, court her. Don't be backward.